All right, we have short reviews for March 30th, and we have 8 of them this week. And most of them are, again, pretty good, up to a fairly high standard. Not all of it is magic, but most of it is good. So we're going to start with a weird one, an interesting one. The Crooked Whispers is an Argentina-based doom metal band who were originally affiliated with Chad Davis of Hour of 13. And he, I think he played on their 2020 debut, their full length, and he has since left. And to fill his spot on guitar, we have Federico Ramos of death metal band Avernal. And this hasn't drastically changed their sound, but it has them leaning into different directions a little bit on this record. They basically delivered the ideal follow-up to their debut, Satanic Melodies, and Funeral Blues. But the note is that the vocals are perhaps even more over the top this time around. They are what I would consider witching, which, whatever that means. Um, it basically sounds like Burning Witch, that extreme hissing sort of sludge type vocal, which maybe relates a little bit to like an Acid Witch sort of style, and more recent, but not quite. Well, it is about as over the top. Um, so that's an acquired taste. It's not a sludge metal record. It is a doom metal record, and it is really braced and built up by those riffs that carry it. But the vocals are pretty different and probably going to be very off-putting, a little bit just weird on at first glance. But like I said, a little bit of an acquired taste. I actually ended up enjoying this record. I definitely had to give it more than, 3 or 4 listens, and to be honest, I really couldn't leave it on repeat. It was just one listen, and I'll pick it up later on. But it is pretty good, and I think they've done well in kind of continuing the general thread while also just kind of moving on. So definitely worth checking out, and yeah.
He lives down in the mud. I Lord the above. He's thirsty for your blood.
The Golden Grass is a Brooklyn, New York-based hard rock band, a heavy rock band, however you'd like to put that. And really, they play a sort of classic early to mid 70s style, which is very catchy, very memorable, very almost easygoing in style. But this time around, as is our 4th album, Life is Much Stranger, and this is a different tone. We aren't just getting this sort of easygoing, sort of Allman Brothers feeling, uh, jazz from them all the same. This time around, this feels a little bit more impained, impassioned, just a little bit more frustrated. And the way that they sort of work that out is through very strong lead guitar performances and a lot of dual guitar throwing back and forth. Not quite full on Thin Lizzy trade offs back and forth, but close. And again, the Southern rock influence really helps this thing shine all the way through. Although there are some classic sort of late 70s heavy metal influences, some early glam rock, not the cheesy shit, but like the other cheesy shit. Um, so I kind of say like Molly Hatchet and New York Dolls wouldn't really fit what this is. It almost kind of would if they wanted to go there. But everyone mentions like Mountain and bands like that, which makes sense because they were very blues oriented as well. So what this record is the difference between a retro rock record and a record that is old themed, influenced by a lot of things, but it is still rock music. It is still moving music. It's got a rhythm to it that is conducive to the traditions of rock and not just simply imitating them in a cheesy way. This is a band. This band have really reached like a very professional, appreciable level in what they do, and this is kind of just their best selection of songs. I think that like there are a lot of bands that sound like this. There are a lot that sound even better, but these guys have, for my taste, most of this record has great songs. At least 2/3 of it are pretty solid. very memorable. And again, the guitar work is just fantastic on this record. I think the first single, Howlin', that already kind of had me. And there's a lot more of that on this record if you liked that song. So, anyway, check it out if you like that kind of rock music. This is a kind of a cool record. So, Atemporal is a solo project from Sebastian Montesi, who is probably best known for his work in Auroch and Mitochondrion, and Egregore is a more recent group formed by some of those similar musicians. So, this is a solo record. It is entirely performed by him, and you can certainly tell that he programmed the drums on it because they're just so loud and they're kind of all over the place. And I think a lot of people will immediately drop this record um, if they're not if they don't really know what to expect because the programmed drums are just kind of just not something most people will sit down and listen to unless you're interested in what I would call like Bandcamp black metal or those kind of things, demo recordings. It really is a placeholder within a very sophisticated and pretty interesting, somewhat experimental black and death metal record, which plays around with a little bit of heavy metal motifs, polyrhythmic ideas, avant-garde, dissonant phrasing. There's a lot of really great experiments and ideas thrown in here that make for a they tell quite a mangled and distorted story with what they're doing, and they sort of hinted that it's atemporal is sort of a collective, timeless stew of a lot of experiences, and that makes a lot of sense when you sit down with this record and sort of parse through it because there's a thrash metal riff in the middle of this song, there's a this, that, and the other that you can check off the list as you go through it. Now, the big thing here is that even if the programmed drums freak you out and they just sound terrible, go ahead and listen to the 16-minute Draped in Abyssal Fire song that ends the album, because that is the piece that convinced me to go back and take a closer listen. And this is actually a pretty good record. It's just very upfront with sort of accosting you with a lot of this strange interplay between tangents and uh, sort of anti-melodic play, which is pretty interesting overall. So worth checking out if you're interested in weird shit, right?
I see the end, not worry. If
Osseert is a Zwolle, Netherlands-based black metal band and a solo project as far as I know. The drummer from Laster has provided session work on all three of their main recordings so far, and this is a decidedly atmospheric black metal band and very much in the tradition of what is kind of the best out of the country at the moment for my own taste. It's been a while since there's been like a big record in that style, but if you appreciate like Flustrars, Iskander, and Laster, and there's a lot of bands that have popped up there that are just as great. Uh, this is something along those lines, and you really should go back and pick up their sort of more progressive first album and their a little bit more honed second album. And this feels most related to that second album, where they're developing a little bit more of a melodic voice. And here on this short EP, you get two fairly pared down songs, down to 7 and 6 minutes, beyond their usual kind of 9 minute run. And these are some of their strongest material yet. I think these songs are they have a very definitive mood. Um, the atmosphere is very strong, and they continue to work in different vocal techniques that really work in this context. Um, and then the two middle pieces here are I guess what I would consider dungeon synth. For me, it's Castlevania music, whatever you want to call it. It's a really nice way of spacing those two experiences. However, it might not be to your taste, but it fleshes out the EP a little bit so that it's not just a 7 inch. And I enjoyed this one a fair amount. So check it out if that sounds like it's your kind of thing. So I don't really need to do a review of a live recording, but Messa is an Italian atmospheric doom metal band who I think they kind of had more of a bigger hit with their third full length Close, and well, it really shows that they performed these songs live at Roadburn, and this seems to be just a soundboard recording with very minimal audience noise. You can kind of hear it in parts of like the end of the first song here, but that's all. This is just a very straightforward recording, which is the sound of the concert presented very plainly. I think what was remarkable about this performance was that they had 8 people on stage. It was quite a production. I'm not clear if there's a video accompaniment for this that's included in the package. You'd have to look that up yourself. But I will say that I still like these songs from Close. Now, these are only songs from that album, and I don't, maybe you're already familiar enough that you wouldn't need to listen to it, but there is something a little bit extra here in terms of the additional performers and some of the interstitial moments feeling a little bit jammed, a little bit emergent, just slightly enough. I'd have to go back and really closely compare every moment, but these are uh, generally a little bit longer than their counterparts on record. They're also slightly less layered in terms of vocals, so we sort of get to hear the reality of it while also hearing like an amplified version of it, and that was interesting to me, so I thought I'd talk about it. Stillbirth is a German brutal death metal slash deathcore band, and probably leaning more towards just brutal death metal lately. Uh, and Homo Deus is their 8th full length. And it's a very straightforward record for the most part. This is just them sticking to what they do and just slamming it out in a very literal way. Uh, there's a big focus on groove in all of their records, which date back to, I think, 2004, or early, like 1999 is when they started. And like, this is just aggressive, very loud, uh, like modern standard, super huge brutal death metal. Like, that's just all it is. Uh, Now they throw in a couple of things here and there where there's like a maybe more of a technical death metal song that ends the record. There's a little bit of a stoner groove on one of the songs that is actually better than a lot of the record. Uh, so they've got a couple of new ideas here. It doesn't feel like they really want to. They didn't want to start on this new label, a new signing, like doing something that they haven't done before quite yet. But I feel like they're ready to sort of flesh out a little bit and try a couple of new things. So I see some of that on the horizon in this record, and that's a good sign. I'm not the hugest fan of this band, but they seem like they're having fun, and I like the over-the-top nature of this recording. And their last record was pretty good. It was a little bit shorter. This is like about 10 minutes too long. So check it out. So Iskelgroth is one of Dave Rotten's bands, the fellow from Avulsed and Extreme Music, and this is a project with Vincent Paya and Javier Fernandez, where they basically their original take for this band was more centered around a sort of a more bestial Black Death sound, something a little bit more visceral, a little bit more brutal. It was an exploration of the aggressive textures of the time. And this is a little bit more of a throwback feeling record, which touches upon more of a second wave black metal sound, in addition to some death metal influences and their own additional sonic interests. And the big thing here is that they incorporate quite a lot of keyboards into the riff progressions and melodies, which is definitely evocative of a certain era. And they step a little bit away from the more brutal sort of Angel Corpse side of things, which I guess we could imply was sort of in the realm of the first album. So in a lot of ways, it feels like they picked up this record and this project and said, let's make sort of a black and death metal record the way we want to, that combines all our interests as they are now, and it contrasts in an interesting way to their 2010 or 2011 record, that first one. So cool to see them come back, and this is a pretty great looking record. I really like the cover art. I think it sounds pretty good. I think the big thing is they sound a bit more inspired than they have in some of their other side projects lately. So I felt like this was something to champion, that it feels like they're into this and they could probably iterate on it pretty fast. The pace is up. The drumming is especially good. And some of the more melodic but fast-paced pieces on here were actually pretty good. So the Grifted used to be known as Mr. Death, and the big hook back in the early 2010s or so was that this had original members of Treblinka and the first lineup of Tiamat. Eventually, it was the same band essentially, with a couple of key outliers, and so that's just a Swedish death metal. Part of the important canon of Swedish death metal is in those releases, and I think Treblinka's demos are very important, and early Tiamat is fantastic. I think the bassist here played on all their albums up till about 1991. Those are some of my favorites in that sort of slightly atmospheric realm of early death metal, as well as just the raw, aggressive side of death metal. But I don't want to get too hung up on I like Swedish death metal. Of course I do, but this is more of a death and roll record. It is more of a just kind of a standard Swedish death metal sound, and it's very evenly paced. It's very evenly performed. It's very neatly arranged. There's a lot of great ideas in terms of guitar tones and leads, and there's a lot of detail put into each of these songs, but they all kind of barrel along at the same pace. It does feel like a little bit of like the Wolverine blues era of death metal, where things slowed down, the riffs got simpler, and the spaces were filled in by more punkish kicking around. And unfortunately, a lot of the cheaper crap that comes out today that is centered around Swedish death metal often leads into those punkish influences, so it kind of taints everything. I'm not saying that's what this is. I'm saying that when they lean into the more D-beat feeling kicks of this record, it kind of just puts it into the average category in a lot of ways, even though this is a pretty cool record. It is probably something more for the death and roll fan, just for the pacing and the way that it kind of pushes its weight around overall. It could have been shorter. They could have incorporated a bit more variety of pacing here, but overall, it's a very professional record that was easy to listen to and had a kind of a slightly unique sound. That's it's worth